Hey y'all, and welcome to the Max Life. Today I'm so excited because I have been showing y'all our pantry, many of the things that we have put away, whether it's canned, dehydrated, freeze-dried, and a couple of the things that we bought. But I am going to be doing my workshop with you guys today in hopes that if you have any questions or concerns, maybe even lack a little bit in confidence when it comes to pressure canning, that by the end of this series, you will be like, I can do this. So I want to start off by saying this is going to be at least a two-part series. For the first day that I'm talking to you guys and teaching you guys, it's going to be an all here kind of thing. And what I mean by that is today I'm going to be walking you through a lot of the need to knows before you start pressure canning, the tips that will help you successfully can as well, a lot of the tricks that I do while I can. So this will be treated like a canning class of someone who has never canned anything before. I'm going to be going over absolutely as much as I can think of. I'm going to be going over that. Now, I have actually hosted within my home many canning classes before, but you guys, even though you won't be able to get the hands-on experience of actually putting the jar over in the pressure canner, you're still going to be getting a free one-on-one workshop with me, and I'm going to cover a lot of ground. I'm going to go real slow, and hopefully you guys can take notes and write these things down so that you will know exactly what to do when you get all your stuff together and you say, hey, I want to go pressure can. You'll have the confidence that you need to do that. So after we do a series of hearing it, I'm going to be doing a lot of explaining, a lot of detailed teaching, giving a lot of tips and tricks. Then the next series is going to be, you guys, I'm going to cut it off because I don't want to overwhelm you with too much information at one time. But the next video coming out, we're going to actually do it. So you see I have all my stuff out. So I'm going to spend some time teaching you guys because I want you to hear it. Then I'm going to be actually doing you, the camera is going to be moving around a lot. I'm going to be showing you a lot of different things from a lot of different angles. I'm going to be doing a lot of reiterating of what I've already taught, but not only hearing it, you're going to be seeing it this time. So I want you guys to hear it. I want you guys to see it. So then you can go out and do it. What is the biggest thing that scares most people? Well, there's actually two answers to that I hear the most. Is my food going to be safe? Because botulism is a concern. Botulism can be found in the soil, and when it gets into your food, that's when you have a problem. It is not very common, but botulism spores is what we're concerned about. So why water bath? Why pressure can? Well, I'm glad you asked that question, and that's what I'm going to address right now. So when you have low acidic foods, botulism can be cooked. Botulism spores cannot be cooked. The temperature has to be high enough to kill the botulism spores in the food, or botulism can grow again. And then if you take that food and don't cook it, there's a chance that you could get botulism. So a lot of people really freak out about that. I have never opened a can and not cooked it before I ate it anyway, or at least heated it up hot enough to kill any botulism that may be in there. That is your low acidic foods. Those are going to be things like your squash, your meats, your peas, your beans, items like that. Now, hot water bathing is for your more high acidic foods, and as a general rule of thumb, that is going to be things like your fruits, strawberries, blueberries, your jams, your jellies, a lot of the fruit items in general, tomatoes. Those are the type things that you can hot water bath. So hot water bathing and pressure canning are two totally different styles of canning. Your hot water bathing, all you're gonna do is prep in your jars. You put it over in a big container of water where water has to actually cover the jars. You're bringing it to a rolling boil, and then you would process your jars from that time. Pressure canning is completely different. You actually have to have a pressure canner, and we're going to talk more about that in just a little while. You actually have to have a pressure canner, and when you put the top on and you bring your pot up to a boil and you are regulating the amount of steam that can be released from your pressure canner, it creates an even hotter temperature. You're under that pressure because you have a lid that is sealed down with a rolling bowl heating up in that container. So it is initially creating a pressure and a very high temperature. And some foods need to be pressure canned, some can be hot water bath. Now, it's a little controversial. There are some people who have said, well, my mammy used to put up green beans in a hot water bath canner and she would boil them for 3 hours. Most of the things, I generally follow my book by guidelines. There are a couple of things, like we're going to be doing in a little while, that I have deemed very important for my family that the book doesn't even suggest canning. In canning, it is best to stay with your guidelines. If you decide to rebel can, I suggest you find someone and talk to them. Make sure that Mamie's been doing this for a really long time. If Mamie's been doing it for a really long time, I personally feel good about it and my family doing it for my family. Now, I'm not saying if Mamie tells you that's how she cans her beans that she's wrong. I'm just saying I would rather pressure can some of my foods that I know are low acidic foods. I would rather pressure can those. Ultimately, you have to be the judge for your family and decide what is best for you. Next biggest scare in the kitchen is everybody says, well, I don't want to pressure can because, y'all said it, I don't want to blow up the kitchen. Well, I do know that those things have happened. I will say that. I actually personally know a couple of people that have actually blew up the canner in their kitchen. Thankfully, in the situations, nobody was hurt, and it was a really long time ago. So let me reassure you with a couple of things first. Most of your newer pressure canners today are made with this little hole right here. If you see that little hole, that is actually a piece of rubber. It's a harder piece of rubber, but you can see that on this side of my cannon jar right here, if for some reason, maybe Livy pushed a color in my vent steamer, which is right here. We're gonna talk about all this a little bit more, but for right now, I'm just trying to talk about not blowing up the kitchen, okay? So this little vent right here, for whatever reason, if my vent steam wasn't working, I had locked this down, no steam was coming out. This thing is building up pressure, right? Because I have turned up the heat and there's no way for the steam to go out. I'm building up pressure. But Livy's clogged my hole. Thankfully, with a lot of your newer made pressure canners, they're made with what's called an emergency release valve. So if I was to not check my vent, which I check it every time, but say I was to not check my vent and I put this thing on and turned it up, my emergency release valve would blow. I actually don't know at what temperature, but I read in my book, which we're going to talk about in a minute, I read in my book that if the pressure gets, I don't remember what it was, that this thing will actually blow out before my lid blows off. So when it starts getting too much pressure, before my lid blows off, this rubber seal is going to blow out and release steam, which will cause the pressure to go down. If you happen to find a pressure canner at a garage sale, a thrift store, somebody gives you one that maybe Grammy had and they don't want it because they don't want a can, whatever, you get one and it's not new. I would suggest you do a couple of things. First, I would contact my local extension service and see if they have someone there that can first check your gauge. They have a little device that can go right here, and I don't know what all they do to it, but I do know that they can check your gauge to make sure that it is accurate, because you don't want your gauge to show you it's at 5 pounds of pressure and it's actually at 15, okay? That wouldn't be a good thing. So they can actually test that and check it. You also want to check if you get them, now I have an All-American, it's a steel to steel seal, which means I don't have a rubber gasket on mine that I have to replace. There's not one on my lid, there's not one on my canner. However, a lot of your pressure canners are made with these rubber gaskets, the rubber seals that go in the lids. So you would need to make sure that your seal was inspected. You also want to check your lid and your pressure canner, the sides, the bottoms, the insides, the whole thing for cracks. Because if you start building pressure in a machine and it is weak and you have a crack in it, I would foresee not a very good thing. So if you happen to get one that's not new, be sure of those things, that you have them checked out. You also need to be mindful that your newer ones do come with your emergency release valve. So if something were to happen, this rubber gasket would blow out and release steam before your lid blew off. Now I want to get into a couple of things that you will need to can. First is I have just a regular ball blue book. They are fairly inexpensive. I mostly like mine because it will tell you if I want to can something and I don't know maybe what goes in it or maybe how long it should be processed. You can flip in your book and it will tell you literally step by step exactly how to can the product. It will tell you time, it will tell you at what pressure, it will tell you exactly how to fill your jars, the exact head space. It literally tells you everything step by step in your book, along with the recipes, all the ingredients that you would need for that recipe. So I really like this book. I really like to keep this book on hand. So if I say, hey, I want a can, I can flip to my book. Hey, I don't remember what time lima beans are. It tells me step by step, and then it says to process quart jars for 50 minutes. So instead of trying to remember everything, I can flip right to this book, and it is very helpful. It will tell you to process for the longest time. So if you decide to do something like vegetable soup and you decide the recipe calls for beef tips and you decide to put the beef tips in, it will tell you to process for the longer time because meats are processed for way longer than vegetables. You're also going to need a pressure canner. Now, I personally went ahead and bought an All-American for several reasons. One, I didn't want to deal with the seals, okay? I just did not want to deal with the seals. And when you pick up this lid, this is a very heavy duty lid. I wanted one like Mamie had, and they used to make them back in the day very heavy. Even my pot, I already have water in it, but I'm not gonna pick it up. It is a very heavy pot. So I wanted one like they used to make, old school, and the only choice that I knew was an All-American. They do come with a price, but my All-American canner is going to last me for years and years and years, just like they used to make back in the old days, and that was my goal. However, I am going to tell you guys that Presto makes one. It might not be as heavy duty as an All-American, however, it gets the job done. So if you're on a budget and you say, you know what, I just want to dive in, I want to try this, start out with a Presto. They're pretty cost effective. You can get them. It might not last you for 50 years like I'm hoping mine is, but that's okay for right now. You can get one, learn what you need to do, and if you see down the road, hey, I want to sell mine and invest, hey, do it. That's a great idea. You can do that. Get your money back out of yours and invest. If not, it still does the same thing. A Presto, there are several brands, they all do the same thing, but you do need a pressure canner, and I would recommend getting one with a gauge that you can see your pressure. It is not required, it is optional, but I do recommend. Actually, my very first pressure canner that I had did not have a gauge where I could see what my numbers were on. I did not even take it out of the box. I didn't buy it. Actually, Colby bought it. This was my purchase. So I do recommend getting one at least with a gauge where you can see your numbers. It will make you feel much better about your canner when you can look and see and know exactly where your pressure is at. Here are a couple of things that you're going to find very handy while you're pressure canning. One is a jar lifter. They actually sell a couple of things that I'm going to be talking about in kits. You can check out my Amazon store. A lot of the things that I have are right on that store. I already have it, basically you can say prepackaged for you. But a jar lifter you're going to need, because these jars are extremely, extremely hot. You cannot definitely touch them with your hand, and I don't recommend trying to reach your arm in with a towel. Chances are you're going to get burned. Get a jar lifter and pick up your jars because they are very, very hot. Also, you're going to need a debubbler. This is actually just a chopstick. This was a fancy debubbler. Whatever you have is fine. Just make sure that they're clean because you're going to be sticking them down in your food. The thing with debubblers, now if you're completely unfamiliar with this, what do I mean by a debubbler? For example, when I can my potatoes or I can squash or whatever I'm canning in my jars, peas, I put them in my jars. When I put the water on top, sometimes air gets trapped under those items of food. And when that happens and you pour your water level, which we're going to talk about in a little while, when you pour your water level over into your jars and you start getting that air out by sticking this down into your jars and moving that food around, you're going to notice the air is going to come out, but the water level is going to go down. Well, if your water level goes down, it's a problem. You need to cover your food. And again, in your Ball Blue Book, it will tell you the head spaces of your jars, which we're going to get to in a minute. We're going to go through all those steps in a minute. So, a funnel is another thing. When you get your jar and you're ready to start packing your jar, whether you do cold pack, raw pack, or hot pack, however you put it in your jar, you're going to use your funnel. If you see that, it not only makes it less messy, but for the majority of your canning, you're going to see that this funnel actually covers this rim. And we're going to talk about the importance of this rim in a minute. But you're going to find that a funnel that you want to have on hand as well. When we talk about headspace, they make this little tool. Again, it comes in a kit. Headspace is important for a couple of reasons. When you pack your jars, if you put your food all the way to the tippy top and you put it over in your pressure canner and you get that pressure canner just to boiling, and it has to boil for 30 and 40 minutes. Well, guess what your jars are going to be doing on the insides? They're going to be boiling too. Well, what does boiling water look like? It comes up and out. So if you have food in here and you have filled it up to the tippy top, it's going to come out from under those rings because it is going to be cooking and boiling all in your jar. So it will tell you in your book certain head spaces that you need. I don't get real technical. I usually pack my jars and give myself an inch headspace. It's different, give or take. If you want to be real picky about how much you can get in every jar, they make these little tools where you can literally, that is an inch headspace, that is 3/4 of an inch headspace, that's a half, and that's a 1/4. So some things you can actually pack way up high like that. This could also double as a debubbler. This is a little tool that, again, it just comes in a kit. If you measure, of course, you can see that. I tend to give myself at least an inch headspace in my jars. You're also going to want to keep vinegar on hand, and I'm going to tell you why. You want to keep a very clean surface, but also your jars, there's a lot I need to cover right here, so y'all just hang on tight. When you're packing your jars, anything that gets on this top of this flat surface, if you leave a food particle or you leave a little bit of salt, and then you take your little lid and you put on top of that, it might not seal all the way because there is something in between this rubber gasket and the glass part of the jar that needs to seal. So every jar, every single jar that I fill, I put vinegar on a napkin and wipe the top every single time. It is very, very important to have the tops of your jars very clean. Dealing with lids. I only go with trusted lids. Please do not go out to Dollar General and get cheap lids, because if you do, if they cannot withstand cooking under pressure, they will cave, they will not seal. You're gonna be wasting your time, your money, and your food. It is a no, no, no. Almost all of my lids that I have are ball. I have a couple of Golden Harvest, and I have a couple of 4-jar. Ball is my absolute favorite. It's my go-to. The other ones do the job, but I have never had a problem with ball. In all of my days canning, I've never had a problem with ball. So another thing I want to mention about the lids, because they do mass produce these, make it a habit to check once you get your jar filled, which we're going to go into more details in a minute. I'm just telling y'all lots of tips and tricks right here to save you a headache in the long run. Y'all will thank me later. Check all your lids, okay? They're mass produced. If you get one out and there is a piece or a bump over here on your rubber seal, don't use it, okay? If there is any rust marks, if there are any deformities whatsoever in your lids, absolutely do not use them. Don't take the chance. Don't use them. I realize it's a couple of cents, but if you try to save that couple of cents and for whatever reason your lid does not seal, you have wasted your food. So check your lids. Also, we're going to be heating these things up. While I'm talking about lids, if you want to write a little tab that says lid tips, when you're heating your lids up and you go to put them on your jar, do not boil your lids. You want to bring them to an almost boil, but do not bring your lids to a boil. You do not want the rubber gasket getting that hot yet. In your book, you're going to notice these terms: raw pack, cold pack, or it gives you an option to hot pack. If it's in the recipe, you can use either one of those. So what does it mean to cold pack or raw pack something? That basically means you're not heating it up. You're just taking peas, for example, you're taking your peas, you're shelling them, you're washing them really good, you're straining all the water off, then you're going to pack them in your jar. I usually use a simple measuring cup, dip in my peas, pour them over in my jar. Your jar, I like my jars hot. I like my whatever liquid I'm putting in my jar, I like it hot. If it gives me the option to cold pack something, as long as it's not refrigerator temperature, because y'all hear me, if you get your glass jars out that have been boiling for sterilization and you put them in this cold jar, your jar is going to break every single time. You cannot fluctuate your temperatures on these jars. We're still in tips, y'all. So if you get your sterilized, really hot jar out, some people use the dishwashers. I'm just trying to cover all of my grounds. I don't like my dishwasher. I don't use my dishwasher. For this, I have a sterilization setting. However, I just don't like it. I don't feel like my jars are super clean. So I know if I put them over in boiling water and boil them for 10 or 15 minutes at a full rolling boil, I know my jars are clean. So back to packing. I can take those raw or cold, not cold, they call them cold, but they're room temperature beans, put them over into my hot jar. Now, if it gives me the option to hot pack, I can actually take my beans, put them on the stove in some water, get them really hot, put them over in my jar hot. So if it gives you the option to raw pack or cold pack or to hot pack, you can decide what's easiest for you. I have done different ways on both. Usually in my peas, for example, I usually raw pack those. There are some things though I will put on the stove, get it really hot, then put in my jar. But if it gives you an option, you can do either. If it doesn't give you the option, then you follow the instructions in the book. One other thing, while we're doing tips and tricks, is your jars. Now I'm showing you this jar on purpose. I hope that you can see that nick right there, because we use these jars If I finish my butter out of it, I wash it, it goes in the cabinet, we use it. If your jars could get damaged if they're new, but regardless of what jar you used, new or if you reuse them like we do, I pulled this right out of the cabinet, didn't realize it had a nick, but I spotted it. I was gathering my jars out to sterilize. You do not want to use a jar that has any kinds of nicks, cracks, whatsoever. Toss those jars, do not use them. Before we move on anymore, I have to pause and talk to you about the canner a little bit more, because that's what we're using. That is where the bulk of the questions are going to come from, and I can't answer them all for you because I've already mentioned some of the differences in the canners with the seals. I cannot tell you how to properly take care of your canner if it's a Presto, because I don't have a Presto. I have an All-American. I'm going to, in the next video, show you exactly how I set mine up. However, if you have a Presto or another brand, it's gonna look a lot different for you. So I said all that to say this: you have to get those instructions out for your canner. Get your manual out. You must read it. There are gonna be some things that you need to know. Water levels are different for your pressure canners and your hot water bath. The water levels are different. Even the different brand are gonna recommend you put different water levels in your canner. You need to know those things. Get your manuals out. If you pick one up from a secondhand store or somebody gifts you one, the best thing to do if you don't have a manual is go to the internet, type in the style, model number, whatever you can find, let it pull up a manual for you. A lot of times those are right there on the internet. You must go over your manual. You have to know your canner. I can tell you about the vent steam, and I can tell you about the gauge, and I can tell you about my emergency release valve, but you have to know your canner inside and out. You have to learn the parts. You have to learn if you need to replace your rubber seal. It's going to give you an estimated time frame. Maybe it's every year. I'm not sure, that you have to replace those. Again, I don't have that. I cannot tell y'all that information. I do know that mine says oil the outside after each use for that steel to steel seal. That is just something that my instructions told me to do. So when you have your pressure canner, it is vitally, vitally important for you to get the manual out and learn your pressure canner, learn how to take care of it. Now, regardless on whatever type of pressure canner you get, whatever brand, you're gonna have this vent right here. All of your pressure canners are going to have a vent. Now, when I put this top on, when it starts getting to a boil, I'm going to see vent come out of my vent steam. Before you start with your lid on the top, you need to check through. I usually look like this. Shine it to a light and look through and make sure that I can see the light on the other side. This does not need to be clogged up. I already mentioned that to y'all, but I cannot stress that enough. Your vent, always check it before, because you're gonna want that steam to come through. It does not matter what kind of canner that you have. Something else to keep in mind: if you grab your book and you flip the lima beans and it tells you quart jars are 50 minutes, do not think that you're gonna go in the kitchen and you're gonna be done in about 50 minutes to an hour. That is not the case with pressure canning. You have to sterilize your jars. I take all of my clean jars, put them in a big, huge pot of water on high, cover it up. It usually takes an hour before I'm done sterilizing just my jars. Now, I do other things in that time, but while I have it on the stove, I put this will show you, and it is very hot if you cannot see that. This shows you how big my pot is. I put all my jars over in there. I bring it to a full rolling boil, and let it boil about 15 minutes. Usually while that's going on, I go ahead and get my canner down, go ahead and get my other pots out, things like my handy dandy tools, my vinegar, my lids, and my rings that I'm gonna need. And before I forget to tell y'all this, go back under lids and rings. If you get a ring out that has rust, because I do reuse mine, rust like this one is going in the garbage can. You want to check your rings just like you do your lids, because if this little metal piece right here is dented in, it's gonna affect the way it puts pressure on your handy dandy lid. And if this does not have an equal amount of pressure all the way around, because this is dented, guess what's gonna happen to the rubber seal? It's not gonna seal correctly. So you want to check your lids for dents and rust before you move on. So once you have your jars sterilized, you have all of your items out, you're gonna prep your food, whether it's peeling cucumbers and cutting those up, or just chopping them up, chopping your potatoes, whatever you have to do to prep your food. Your book will also tell you how to prep your food. That is when I usually check my lids, check my rings. Once you have all of your prep work done and you move on to packing your jars, then you will spend time packing each jar. Depending on what it is, depends on the amount of time that it will take you. Once you get all of your jars packed and over in your pressure canner, and then you're gonna follow your canner's instructions. I know you are. Once you get your lid on, you're going to need to let it vent steam for 10 minutes. Y'all write that down, make a note on it. The newer Canon book actually says in the instructions, I'm under something extra, it's not the pressure cannon, low acidic foods. It actually says vent steam for 10 minutes. It is in there. It tells you step by step. Right now, I'm not letting you see me do it. I just want you to hear me doing it. My jars are over in my canner. My lid is on. I am watching it vent steam. When you see it come out a little bit, that's not enough. You want to be able to wipe your hand over the vent steam and feel a steam coming out. When you can do that, set your timer for 10 minutes, okay? When your 10 minutes goes up, and only then, you get your weight. Now, depending on your altitude, your weight may look different. Me, my weight is 10 pounds. I've never canned anything that has been more or less than 10 pounds. On my weight, because I know my pressure canner, it has these little slots on the bottom, and one says 5, one says 10, one says 15. So I know I'm going to be at 10 pounds of pressure. My 10 minutes is up. Now I put my weight on. It is gonna sound just like this. You don't hear anything, and you're not gonna hear anything until this gauge that is at probably 2 or 3 maybe, is at nothing, starts pressuring up. When it gets to 10 pounds, then you're gonna hear this. Why? Because it is regulating, letting steam out. So I'm at 10 pounds of pressure. It knows that because I have 10 pounds on there, it is gonna jiggle to let some of the steam out so that my gauge stays at 10. If it stayed on there and kept it clamped off, it would continue to build pressure. Something else that you want to remember about the pressure, if your stove is on super high, you're putting a lot of heat under that pot. You will learn your stove as you get in the kitchen and do. When I have my jars in, my 10 minutes has been up, my weight is on, and now I'm jiggling. I'm gonna set my timer at this point in time for the amount of time it says to process, whether it's 30 minutes or an hour and a half, whatever my timer is, only when you're at 10 pounds. You will process when you're at 10 pounds. Everything that it says process has to be once it's at 10 pounds. If it's not at 10 pounds, your timer can't be going. When it says process for 50 minutes, it means 50 minutes under 10 pounds. When you are at your 10 pounds and you've got all of that heat underneath, you might, here's a tip, you might have to adjust your heat. Now, I know that my stove on high is going to continue to build pressure no matter if this is jiggling or not. I can watch my gauge and see that even though this is jiggling, my pressure is still gonna go up some because I have a tremendous amount of heat underneath. For me, I've adjusted mine to a medium high. My medium high on my stove keeps me at 10 pounds of pressure, so it keeps it rocking. It's hot enough to keep it rocking, but it's not so hot that my pressure continues to build. Now, once I'm at 10 pounds of pressure and I'm jiggling away, I have my stove set to where it's gonna maintain enough heat to keep me at 10 pounds where I'm jiggling, but not too hot to where I'm continuing to build pressure. I set my timer for the amount of time that I need to process my food for. This handy dandy book has lots and lots of information in it. Then I will set my timer. Then you process for the time that it says to process. Now, once your timer goes off, you do absolutely nothing. Do y'all see my big X? Put a note that says nothing. When your timer goes off, beep, you do not do anything. Don't touch the pressure canner. All you're gonna do is turn the stove off, okay? Don't touch it, don't slide it, don't mess with your weight, which is gonna be hot, by the way. There's another tip. Don't do anything to it. Do not touch it. All you're doing is killing the heat source. Repeat that, kill the heat source. Don't touch it anymore. My timer just went off. All I'm doing is turning the heat off, okay? Then you don't do anything else until this gets to 0, okay? Leave it alone, don't touch it. When this gets to 0, then take your weight off. It will look like this. Now, I'm not jiggling anymore. It's very quiet. My gauge says 0. Don't touch it with your hand, y'all, for viewing purposes, okay? Don't touch it with your hand. It's gonna be hot. Then take your weight off. I'm at 0. This is gonna steam a little bit more. It's gonna let out a little bit more steam. I usually wait for it to steam all the way down. I don't have anything coming out of here. Then I will take my top off. Now, unless you want a flash steamed facial, when you take your lid off and you unhook it, open it away from you, okay? There's gonna be a lot of steam coming out. You do not want to open that towards your face. Open it away from you. So, I said all of that, went through all the explanation to tell you that timing, just because the book says process for 50 minutes, usually for me, it's a half a day. At the minimum, if I'm canning multiple batches, it is like a whole day ordeal. It is so worth it because I know I'm putting up food for my family, but if you think you can run in the kitchen and get you a batch canned real quick, you have about an hour and a half. Well, it only says 30 minutes, I've got plenty of time. Chances are you are really gonna be pushing it. Just want to give y'all some tips because I know I've been there, I've asked all these questions, I've thought all these thoughts. So there's y'all some tips. When you take your lid off, you're definitely gonna want your handy dandy jar lifter. I take my jars over to another counter. One of the things that I do, if I notice that within my jar is still boiling very heavily, I just take my lid off, put it down on the counter, and let them in the pot with the lid off begin to settle down, because if you squeeze this and mess with that seal, with this rolling, with this just being in such a boil, sometimes it will kind of loosen that pressure and it will try to come underneath, and you don't really want to do that. So you will usually let mine settle down just a little bit, get it out, put it over on the counter. Do not mess with them. It's going to be very tempting to want to go over and press the top and see if it's sealed. Don't mess with them. Let them completely cool. It takes hours for this jar and the items inside of it to completely cool. Y'all, leave it alone. Don't be tempted to do it. Just leave it alone. Now, here's some tips for what I do after my jars are out and they have completely cooled down. I have seen people store their jars with the lids and the rings on. I did for a long time until I had someone say, why do you still have those rings on? I was like, I don't know, I just thought that's what you were supposed to do. I was actually not pressure canning at the time. I was just hot water bathing because I thought they looked so cute too, and I just didn't know. Now, after being under several experienced people, I know to take this off. Once my jars are cooled down, you do not want to leave this on. It could create a false seal that you don't want. It also over time rust out. You do not want that rust to get underneath that seal and mess up your seal for any reason. Our humidity level here is so incredibly high. These rust out super easy. Within a year, these things are rusted out. They're super cheap and super flimsy. Take them off. Another thing that I do, once they're completely cooled, my seal is on good, I wash them with soap and water, just if anything was to creep out on the sides and make it sticky or whatever. I just clean up my jars. Then I write what it is and my dates on every single jar. What it is and my dates on every single jar. Now, when you get ready to check your jars, say you've had them on the shelf for a little while, here is the difference in what a sealed and not sealed jar is like. If your jar is sealed, when you press down on it, it will be hard and not move. Whenever your jar is not sealed, this is what it will sound like. It's not sealed. That middle will bounce up and down. So you will know, chances are you're gonna smell it. I have found one jar on all of my canning racks that was not good, but always test your lids, make sure they're sealed on. You cannot pop this off with your thumb. The seal should be sealed down so tight that you have to pry it off. Those are some tips and some tricks of teaching you canning one-on-one, the basics that you need to know to get you started. I have covered a lot. I hope you had a pencil and paper and jotted all of those notes down, because with this thing in your mind and being able to hear it is going to really boost your confidence. And just know that you can do it. I was in those shoes at one point in time where I said, I have a lot of kids, I can't pressure can because I'm scared to walk away from my canner. Don't walk away from your canner. That's a big no-no. Once you get all of your stuff in there, I'm not saying you can't go to the bathroom, you can't take one of your kids to the bathroom, but you do not want to walk away and not know where your pressure is. Be available to check your pressure. You can do this. Now, once your jars are done, they need to be stored in a cool, dark place. Your food is just gonna last longer when they're in a cool, dark place. Now, you guys have seen my pantry. You've seen my pantry tours. If you have not, please go back and check out those videos. But you have seen my pantry that is literally right here. I have windows on this side and windows on this side where light comes in. I eat on these jars first. These jars typically don't last me very long. Over time, the light from my windows could cause my food to break down and spoil faster. I have not experienced that. I'm just telling you what they say. Mamie suggests to keep your stuff in a cool, dark place because it will last longer. I do have food, y'all don't tell anybody, I do have food still on my shelf that is still good from 2017. Now, I'm gonna tell you that it's suggested that your food will stay good from 1 to 2 years. The judgment call is yours, whether you want to feed it to your family. I always say double check your food. If there's any questions, chunk it. I have only had to chunk one jar. So I love pressure canning. I think it is an amazing skill to have, whether it's farmer markets food, whether it's food that you've grown, or whether it's food from the grocery store. You're gonna be able to take that food, put it into something that requires absolutely no grid to store. You can put it over on your shelves. You can put them under your bed. You can put them in the top of your closet. Wherever you want to put them, they require absolutely no electricity to sit there and stay on your shelves for many years to come. So if you ever do find yourself in a hard time, or just simply needing to preserve your food, you're able to do that. It is a wonderful skill. So I knew that if I just jumped in there and said, you know what, I'm gonna learn the skill, I'm gonna do it, because I was very, very nervous about it. Just like many of you, I was very, very nervous, but it is a wonderful, wonderful thing to be able to learn how to do, and you can absolutely do it. Now, y'all have heard me teach you how to can. You've had Canning 101 with Misty from the Max Light. So now you have heard exactly what you need. You've learned about your tools. I've talked you through step by step. Now I want you to actually see the process step by step. I want you to see me. You won't actually be able to reach your hands through the TV or through the phone, whatever device you have, the computer, and actually do this, but I hope it is the next best thing. I've tried to tell you guys all the tips and all the tricks that I have been doing, all of my years of canning, all of the experience that I have on the shelf, which I'm still greatly under many, many experienced canners, but I have canned so much stuff, such a great variety of foods. So I've tried to share. I'm sure that I might have missed something, but I think it is enough to give you guys confidence to say, hey, I can do this. Oh, I remember Misty telling me to do this. I better check that lid and make sure that it's clean. I better check that vent and make sure that my steam can come through. So I hope that you guys have really learned from this. Stay tuned, because the very next video that's going to be coming out is me recording canning butter, which I'm doing right now. My butter can stay on my shelf for many years. This is homemade butter from our raw dairy milk. However, store-bought butter can be stored just as well, and that gives you a fat source that does not require refrigeration, y'all. That is a wonderful, wonderful thing. So stay tuned for my upcoming video. I'm gonna be showing you step by step exactly what I do to can. I'm just going to be canning butter, but you can can anything using these same exact steps. I hope y'all check out that video, because it is gonna be really good as well. Happy homesteading, y'all.